From Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surovell.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I represent a district that's a pretty diverse place. I think last time I looked at the U.S. Census, 30% of my constituents were born in another country. And this bill, albeit if you read it legally, I'm not really clear how far it goes, it sends a pretty clear message. And that's a message that we're hearing a lot right now coming from a certain house across the river from my district. And a lot of people are hearing that message, and they're terrified. I mean, I just was watching the TV this morning about an executive order that came out this morning, which said that our president is going to hire 10,000 new ICE agents and another 5,000 border guards, and that they intend to deputize local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law. You couple that with this bill, it could have a lot of unknown consequences, which we don't, I think, even begin to comprehend. About 2 weeks ago, there was a dance in my high school, and my daughter had some of her friends over to have pizza before they went, and one of her friends was from Central America. About 24 hours before that, ICE raided a church in my district. They didn't go in the church. They stood outside of a hypothermia shelter, and then they waited for people to come out of this church hypothermia shelter to ask them if they had seen somebody. And lo and behold, it turns out that some of those people didn't have the right papers. They, by the way, arrested an American, arrested a veteran, and held him for a while until they figured out he was legal. And then they ended up taking a bunch of others, threw them in a van with 10 other guys, and hauled them off to who knows where. I explained this to this girl who was in my kitchen, and she started to cry. I didn't mean to scare her, but she started to cry. This is how children in my district feel today. I had a town hall meeting the next day. I think I mentioned it earlier. About 200 people showed up to my town hall meeting. A second grade teacher stood up in the back and said, we have to deal with this fear these kinds of things generate in school every day. We have to deal with these children coming in crying their parents and their uncles and their aunts are going to be taken away because of these noises that they're hearing. Noises that mainly come out of D.C., but they're starting to come from around here as well. And we don't need to be getting in the middle of this. People at this town hall were in fear of coming out of their house. There were people saying, I had people from their churches worried that ICE was going to stake out a couple of Catholic churches in my district to see who they could talk to walking out the door as soon as church let out because of what's going on. And this bill sends the message that we're going to get right on board with that policy, that we're going to get right on board picking on people who aren't from around here and haul them back to wherever they came from. Mr. President, that's the policy that I don't think, personally, I don't think it's American. I also don't think it's Virginian, and I'll tell you why. You know, last spring, after we got out of session, my wife wanted to go to Bavaria, to Germany. And she wanted to show our kids all these castles and all this medieval stuff they have there. So we went to Germany. While we were driving around through Germany, a couple of the places we went were these old palaces that used to be run by the Catholic bishops that used to govern Germany back in the early 18th century. And I was reading some of the displays, and it talked about how in the early 1700s, the Germans, the governing Catholic Church, decided to purge all the Protestants out of Germany. And I started to think about that because, as you all know, I've mentioned, I have kind of a confused background. I'm half redneck and half Jew. And my Virginia side, the Virginia side of my family, my great-grandmother was named Ayler. And the Ayler family hails from Madison County. They come from a colony originally called the Germanic Colony. You may have heard of Germanic Community College, which is named after it. And those Germans that settled near Culpeper in Madison County, they came over to the United States, guess when? In the early 1700s. Guess why? Because they were the wrong kind of Christians where they came from. And so they came here. And when they came here, you know, Virginia was not It was not a Baptist colony. It was, in fact, run by the Episcopal Church. This General Assembly ran the Episcopal Church, the Church of England. That was the official state church. And then we adopted, when we became independent in 1776, we declared we were going to have a religious test here because we stood for religious diversity, because we stood as a place, as a beacon for people to come over here and live their life and practice their faith however they felt like it. And bills like this, I think, run counter to our values. They run counter to the reasons why this state was founded. They send a horrible message. I think they send an anti-business message, which I think a lot of us care about, that we're not welcoming to people from other countries, that we don't want them here. And, Mr. President, I think it's a bill we ought to vote down.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from